Anybody? Oh, okay.
Eileen McIntyre, my pronouns are she and her. And this is a joy that we are joined today by our friend and house guest, Mary Pat Sweetman from Seattle, Washington.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. I'm Caitlin Gibson, and my son isn't with me today, but I wanted to share one of his joys with everyone. He finished his Eagle Scout project and built a free library on our street. We live on Hull Street in Hingham, so it's at the Hull Street playground, and it's open to any type of book, banned books, kids books, adult books. So I encourage you to visit the free library and take a book and share a book. Thank you.
Great.
Hi, I'm Chris Johnson. I'd like to light a candle of concern for a friend of mine who lives in Israel with her family, her husband and two young children. They're north of Tel Aviv and they're safe so far, but they have obviously lots of friends and family that they're very concerned about. And I'm trying to keep them all in my thoughts.
Yes.
I have a joy. I'm Bonnie Baines. My pronouns are she and her. And I'd like to share that our guest minister, Reverend Paul, and his wife just got married 3 weeks ago. So congratulations. Oh,
My name is Eric Eldrin Cornetta, pronouns. He, him, you jerk, and wank, wank. I want to share the joy of more than a couple piles of leaves being picked up as my wife appreciates looking at the lawn more than the leaves.
thank you.
Good morning, Clayton Handelman, he, him. I don't know if I would normally share this, but given our topic today, I will. This week it was announced that sales of pluggable electric vehicles, which are much lower impact transportation on the earth, were up 50% from last year this time. And if you know about exponential growth and the fact that the year before it was also up about 50%, you know that if this trend continues, we will rapidly transition to a much lower carbon footprint way of getting around.
Anybody else? Is there anybody on Zoom? Nope, nobody on Zoom. Okay. So these joys and sorrows, whether they're expressed openly in church today or not, will burn like candles for sorrows that are not spoken openly today.
As we prepare to enter in a time of meditation, it behooves us to take a moment to remember the tragedies of war, especially now in Gaza. And I asked Edmund if he would be willing to share a few words this morning. So he sent me this. I weep with the people of Israel and I weep with the people of Palestine. I do not believe this escalation of violence is the path to solving any of the problems in this region. I'm praying that diplomacy may bring about a ceasefire and end the death and destruction. In the near future, in America and other countries around the globe, we can expect the tensions that always lie just beneath the surface of our national life to boil over with anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, and anti-liberal words and actions rearing their ugly heads. And while we are free to express our opinions, we must be aware of the context of such expression and the tendency when tensions run high for people who disagree with us to overreact. It is our right to speak, but it is our choice where and how to speak. We will not douse a fire by throwing gasoline on it. I'm not with Old Ship this morning because of a prior commitment, but I am available by phone or Zoom or personal meeting this evening and at the usual times next week to talk with anyone who feels the need to speak with me for any reason or no reason. So let us consider these candles as a way of understanding and mourning those who suffer from war in far too many parts of our earth today. So as we move into our time of meditation and reflection, let's take a moment of silence to acknowledge the death and injury and fear and displacement that are happening as we speak in Israel, in the West Bank, in Gaza. May the killing be brought to an end. May the suffering end. May relief come quickly. Let us breathe quietly as we offer this heartfelt desire.
This morning's reading is a responsive reading. It's number 570 toward the back of the gray hymnal. But before we get started, I thought I would mention in driving to church today, I noticed that there's very limited parking down in front of 14 Main Street for coffee hour. They have no parking signs up because there's an art walk from 12 to 4 today. So for whatever that's worth. Prayer for the Earth by Barbara Deming. Spirit of love that flows against our flesh, sets it trembling, moves across it as across grass, erasing every boundary that we accept, and swings the doors of our lives wide. This is save our Spirit that hears each one of us, hears all that is, listens, hears us out. Our own pulse beats in every stranger's throat, and also there within the flowered ground, beneath our feet. We can hear it in water, in wood, and even in stone. We are earth of this earth, and we are bone of its bone.
Our offering will now be given and received.
Thank you, choir. That was lovely. Sometimes we get into controversies, and an open heart and an open mind is how we get through together. So Gaia is the Greek goddess of the earth, the goddess who plays the same role in Roman tradition is Terra, hence terraforming, terrestrial, and so on. And the stories about Gaia make it clear that she was not what you would call a touchy-feely mother. She's one of the primordial Greek deities. She's the ancestral mother of us all. She's the mother of Uranus, the sky, from whose sexual union, wait a second, mother, she bore the Titans, who themselves were parents of many of the Olympian gods. And then she came to hate her son Uranus, and she conspired with her son Kronos to castrate him. And later she worked with her grandson Zeus to defeat her own children, the Titans. Not touchy-feely at all. And of course, it's all nonsense. We in our enlightened age, we know that the universe came into being with the Big Bang, and evolution has brought us forth from those origins, and we have no need for such nonsensical tales of how life on Earth began, like this myth of Gaia, or the story from the Iroquois about the beautiful daughter and the turtle. They're found in every country's culture. We need stories. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? What is it that we need to do in our lives? But of course, we, in this scientific age now, understand everything, unlike those primitive ancestors of ours. But Mom seems awfully mad these days somehow. She's lashing out at us with almost as though we've done something wrong. She seems to be waging a shock and awe campaign against us. The Gaia hypothesis, named after that irascible primordial deity, was propounded in the early 1970s by the chemist and inventor James Lovelock and the biologist Lynn Margulis. The hypothesis says that perhaps Earth and all of its biological system behave as a huge interconnected entity. And this entity has closely controlled, self-regulatory negative feedback loops that keep the conditions on our planet within boundaries that are favorable to life, almost as though the Earth itself and its inhabitants constituted a single self-regulating entity, sort of a very abstract being. And Earth could then be said to have emergent properties. And so Earth would need to be seen holistically rather than as merely a collection of discrete parts, sort of like a goddess. Now, of course, with our modern scientific understanding of how everything works, we've lost touch with the sacredness of the Earth. Nothing is forbidden to us. Nothing is off limits, whether in the form of curating life forms, creating artificial intelligence that may someday become much greater than all of humankind's, and taking every last place on Earth to ransack in order to extract fossil fuels and other minerals anywhere on the Earth, on the sea, under the sea, anywhere. We all believe that we should be free to do whatever we wish in order to satisfy our desires. And if we're multi-billionaires, we can even dream about escaping from Mother Earth and becoming completely independent and sustaining ourselves with, well, the resources of other planets would be required, of course, because nothing comes from nothing. But Mom, does seem to be pretty mad these days for some reason. Her shock and awe campaign are finally beginning to work, and at long last, the majority of her children are starting to take notice. Max Weber, the sociologist, argued in The Protestant Ethic that modern capitalism arose, at least in part, from the abstemious habits and ambitions of our Puritan forebears, among them the founders of this congregation. They avoided luxury, but considered that those who prospered were favored by God and therefore part of an elect who would be, through the mysterious workings of God's impenetrable favor, more likely to get to heaven. And given that heaven was the ultimate achievement, the earth mattered little except for purposes of calculation, exploitation, and domination. And in the process, Weber argued, the earth became, quote, disenchanted for us. And his German means literally demagication. As the Encyclopedia Britannica puts it, for Weber, the effect of that demystification was that the world became leached of mystery and richness. It became disenchanted and disenchanting, predictable, intellectualized. And in that sense, the disenchantment of the world is the alienating and undesirable flip side of scientific progress. So, yeah, all those old stories are complete nonsense. We humans are in charge. We can do and should do whatever we want. Nothing is sacred. Nothing is off limits. There need be no end to economic growth and progress ever. But Mom has been pretty irascible lately. Might she be trying to tell us something? Might we, like those old titans of the myth, have grown too powerful for our own good and be at risk of a terrible defeat at Mother's hands? Now, in our own Unitarian Universalist tradition, we have become gradually more aware of the need for the sacred, the need to honor the mystery of the earth, even as we also applaud the unraveling of her secrets and the relentless quests of science. I can remember when we were beginning to adopt a chalice as part of our worship services. My wife and I were going to church in Ridgewood, New Jersey at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. And people resisted that very simple bit of popery, they called it, as though that somehow that we didn't want anything that was anyway mysterious. We wanted just rationality. We have advanced somewhat. At the time of the merger of the Unitarians and Universalists in 1961, we had 6 principles, not 7. And all of them were quite consistent with conventional secular aspirations. And the first 6, of course, continue to be. And they're good aspirations for living in a democratic society. When they were first propounded, they were all in man speak, as were most such expressions of the time, mankind, every man, he as the default pronoun, and so on. And in part as a response to the feminist movement in our midst in the 1970s, and since, a movement arose to revise the principles and to eliminate sexist language, among other purposes. There was a relentless manhunt through our bylaws and later through our hymnals to create an inclusive, non-gendered language instead of the traditional male-centered language. But one other outcome of all these revisions was the adoption of our 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And that moved us beyond the human sphere, beyond good liberal aspirations for a society, into the sphere of all existence. And it added a responsibility to care for our Mother Earth. Here comes the mother again, the goddess, you might want to say. And the other significant change in the expression of our foundational purposes came in 1995 when we added a sixth source for our living tradition. It says we acknowledge our indebtedness to the spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. This too arose from the ferment of the feminist movement, in particular, the women's spirituality movement of that era and the emergence of UU pagans as a distinct strand within our living tradition. And again, this source takes us beyond the Enlightenment's tolerance for people of other religion and back to the notion that the indigenous people of Europe and America, who were often forcibly converted to Christianity, might actually have had something going for them. Maybe even that, gasp, witches might know a thing or two that could enlighten us. Maybe the Native Americans whom we so savagely displaced to create this exceptional nation of ours actually knew how to live in harmony with Mother Nature. So in that spirit, we acknowledge that this building and our town are built on the lands of the Massachusetts people of this area, and that we owe them respect, and that we ought to live more responsibly by learning from them and from all indigenous people. The name Massachusetts, by the way, means at the Great Hill, the Blue Hills, just a bit west of here. And then we have that word sacred. If the circle of life is sacred, then there must be some limits to how we can trespass on life, our own and all of those other lives, beings, entities, interconnected with and dependent upon us in this web of all existence of which we are a part. Maybe we should mend our ways so that Mom doesn't just decide to abandon us altogether. We need to recover a sense of the sacred. We need to recover our sense of gratitude to the web of life that sustains us. We need to acknowledge the ways that we've sometimes destroyed what is sacred. Most of us have lost our sense of the direct connection to our soil. Exposing ourselves and our children to nature is one of the critical ways we remind ourselves of the interconnectedness of all of creation, the immensity of this interconnected web of everything, of which we are just a small part, or should be. The vastness of the oceans, the height of the mountains, the wonders of the heavens, these remind us that we are part of and responsible to care for much more than our own purely personal and exclusively human concerns. It's important that we return to that experience and expression of gratitude for the ultimate source of our lives, not what we've built with our own hands, but what has been given to us without our doing anything, this gift of life that we get from our parents and grandparents and all the generations. We have also been given the means to maintain it. Pope Francis, in his encyclical Laudato Si, Care for Our Common Home, suggests that we return to the old habit that many of us grew up with of saying grace, offering thanks before we eat, as a way of more consistently acknowledging that we did not grow the food, we do not serve it, it comes from our Mother Earth and the workers who bring it to us. We need to practice generosity rather than accumulation. Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants, offers important perspectives on gratitude and many other indigenous beliefs and practices that we might profitably adopt as our own. For example, she says this about generosity. Generosity is simultaneously a moral and a material imperative, especially among people who live close to the land and know its waves of plenty and scarcity, where well-being of one is linked to the well-being of all. Wealth among traditional people is measured by having enough to give away. Hoarding the gift, we become constipated with wealth, bloated with possessions, too heavy to join the dance. And is it not increasingly the case that in this new world where mom seems to be enraged with us that the well-being of one is linked to the well-being of all, we're becoming increasingly aware of the ways that our lifestyle is bringing about changes for those who are unable to afford and who are much more exposed to changes in the climate than we here are fortunate enough to be. So in that spirit, we fortunate Americans in particular can learn to walk more lightly on the earth. There are lots of simple ways that we can each alter our own lives to make life easier for other humans and for all of those other beings in the sacred web of all existence. I think that daily practices can have an important role in helping us to stay focused on doing what we can to limit our own personal impact on the environment, to walk more lightly on our Mother Earth. Gratitude, for one thing, for meals, of course, but also for all of the blessings of our lives. So, to me, recycling is a simple kind of mindfulness practice that will certainly not avert climate change, but at the same time be a way of helping us to pay attention to how much waste each of us is generating and how we might recycle some and reduce as much as possible, including here at Old Ship. We all need to use energy, and we have to. We live in a society that requires us to do so, but there are ways we can reduce our energy use, washing clothes in cold water, for example, using public transportation when possible, sharing rides, flying less, turning off lights, or certainly using LED light whenever possible. Our agricultural system is an increasing burden on the land. The more meat we consume, especially beef, the more land is used and the more some farmers are induced to clear forests to raise food for animals that we consume, with effects that are catastrophic for the health of the Amazon rainforest, for example. So consider committing yourself to Meatless Mondays and pay attention to the impacts that the food you eat are having on the world. Feeding and transporting beef has twice the carbon footprint of any other kind of food. And for that reason, I pledged to myself not to eat beef when I moved to Linden Ponds 2.5 years ago. Waste less insofar as you can. About 40% of the food produced for this country is thrown away. Compost, whatever can be composted, wherever you are, including here, of course. If possible, you can put solar panels on your home or put in better insulation. The Commonwealth offers lots of incentives, and the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act has added additional generous incentives for individuals, organizations, including churches and municipalities, to help us achieve net zero carbon emissions. Hingham Net Zero is focusing our efforts on encouraging homeowners and other organizations to transition to heat pumps whenever possible. You can find lots of material about that at the website of the Hingham Municipal Light Plant. And you can encourage Old Ship to host a community meeting to plan and advocate for this critical step of enabling Hingham to reach our goal of net zero 2040. Banks are beginning to notice that they are under severe criticism for lending to new fossil fuel projects. If your bank is supporting the expansion of fossil fuel fossil fuel exploration and production, and the 4 largest banks in the country are doing precisely that, you could consider moving to another bank perhaps a local bank, and tell them why you're leaving. Third Act, an organization of experienced adults over 60, founded by Bill McKibben and Jane Fonda, among others, is committed to doing everything they can to hasten the transition off of fossil fuels, including public demonstrations against the banks and their funding of the expansion of fossil fuels. Talk to your family and friends about the sacredness of this earth and the wonders of our interconnected web of life, and about what you are doing to walk more lightly on our Mother Earth. You can learn more about what you can do to advocate politically at both local and state and national levels. And you can ensure that the advocacy you do and the groups you join are working for a just transition that includes everyone, not just folks rich enough to buy a new car, making sure that the people in frontline communities of environmental destruction no longer suffer from the assaults on their health and their communities for the sake of the fossil fuel and extraction industries. And here at Old Ship, there are opportunities to be a source of inspiration in the town by taking the lead in transitioning to a fossil-free future. The Federal Inflation Reduction Act, in a big change, instead of incenting only tax-paying organizations, now incents also nonprofits, including, of course, churches, for solar panels, insulation, replacing fossil fuel-fired boilers with heat pumps, and so on. And as you plan your new parish community space, make sure that it wastes as little energy as possible, and that insofar as possible, your energy is not provided by burning stuff, as Bill McKibben puts it. It's easy to get discouraged in this sacred work of cherishing our Mother Earth. The need for change is overwhelming, and the power each one of us has to make change seems so very slight in the light of all that needs to be done. But recall the words of Reverend Edward Everett Hale. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. And of course, no one has to do it alone. We can do this work together. Now, it's not my intention to denigrate science and the responsibility for truth. It's just that science can't tell us how to behave, only the consequences of our behavior. Science is very much a key to responding to the climate crisis. It's just not the whole answer. Our commitments, our hopes, our faith, our respect for the sacred, those are also critically important for responding to Mother Earth's urgent warnings about this climate emergency. I may have indulged a little too much fun at the expense of Gaia. It's not my intention to deny the critical importance of science either, but it's interesting that many of the old myths tell us what happens when humans, and minor gods, of course, transgress beyond our appropriate limits. Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, Prometheus, who stole fire and was endlessly punished. But perhaps more relevant to us today is the story of Pandora. Her insatiable curiosity led her to open a box that released all of the evils to which humankind is prone. But it also released, among all of those evils, the gift of hope. And despite all of the possible horrors that we may have unleashed, despite all we've done to tick off our mother, let us act in hope rather than despair, as we learn again to honor and respect what is sacred, and to do, each of us, whatever we can, to live more lightly as we grow more respect for this magnificent earth and for all of her creatures, for the sacred sky, for the stars in the heavens, the whole astonishing universe, the cosmos, the sacred web of all existence of which we are gratefully apart. So may it be, and amen. Please turn to number 175 in your hymnal. We celebrate the web of life. Please rise in body or in spirit. Bless us and keep us. May its light shine upon us and out from within us, and be gracious unto us, and bring us peace. For this is the day that we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen.